Hello, 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 world. Happy Friday. Welcome to Coded Life, folks. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome and thank you for joining us. It's Friday, so it's our time to chill and relax a little bit. This is the Chat Show, and I'm Sam Basu, your host. With me, I have a guest that you have not seen on Coded Live for maybe about a day. Right, so welcome, our beloved teammate, TJ VanToll. How are you, sir?
Sam, hey everybody. I'm doing all right. I can't complain. We got a little bit of snow coming down here now, which is a little bit disappointing because I was hoping to take my bike back out at lunch, and the cold doesn't bother me, but I don't like going in the snow for kind of obvious reasons.
Right, so let's break down maybe where you and me are. So first of all, let's introduce yourself for the internet. Like, who are you? What do you do here?
I'm TJ VanToll, developer advocate at Progress. I come from a largely web background. The web and JavaScript is how I got my start, and it's mostly what I do here at Progress. So I work with our Kendo UI products, mostly in the React realm these days, but I bounce around to all things sort of JavaScript-y. Done native script and mobile stuff in the past, but usually always some bit of JavaScript twist on things.
Yeah, absolutely. And where do you live?
Michigan, Lansing, Michigan, where it is. I don't know. It hasn't been too cold this year. I don't know about you, but it's been like almost about the same. It's been highs around freezing just about every day, which isn't all that bad, really, all things considered. So
yeah. So for context, this is something TJ and me laugh about a lot. The rest of our team, so I'm in Erie, Pennsylvania, northwest corner, and TJ is in Michigan. And the rest of our teams and most of the folks that we work with are down south in the Americas and much warmer temperatures. And they complain about things being in the 30s, maybe 2 inches of snow. And we're like, it's Wednesday for us.
yeah.
We're just too used to it. So with Lansing, like, what do you like? What do you not like? How long have you been there?
We've got it's a decent place in terms of like Lansing's a big enough city in terms of there's a college, a university. Michigan State University is here. It's the state capital of Michigan. And so because of that, it's like a decent place in terms of entertainment stuff going on, but it's not too big. It's not a huge city. It's still like we have a yard. We're not too congested. So to us, it's a nice mix. There's not a crazy amount of traffic because I don't like living too rural. I'm not that sort of person. But I also don't want to live in like the middle of Manhattan either. So Lansing's a pretty decent mix. And also, the biggest reason is we have family in Michigan. We grew up in Michigan. So for better or worse, this is who we are. Get to root for our Michigan sports teams that lose pretty much consistently, but we have fun losing, so that's okay.
Yeah. We used to live in Columbus, Ohio, which is Ohio State country, and the ongoing fight never will stop between Ohio State and Michigan.
Yeah. No, we hate Ohio State. That's the one.
Our chat room is filling up, and Ala Progman. No, Ala Progman. I always say your name wrong, so sorry about that. 62, Birmingham, Alabama. Good for you. One of our dear friends who used to work with us, Michael Crump, he's from Birmingham. And he's a wonderful dude. He's got his family moved over to Seattle now, works at Microsoft. But I've been to Alabama many, many times, and looks like this year Alabama has their tail up with Ohio State and everything else that went down. So good for you.
Yeah, Alabama, good people, good place. Hate the football team, though. Sorry, no apologies. Too much winning.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned a few things as to where you had started, like in terms of your JavaScript background, but what do you do right now? And and how would you describe kind of what you do to like a 4-year-old?
Yeah, I think, and I'd be curious what you think about this, Sam, too, but developer advocate is a really hard position to explain to someone that's outside of the tech world. I actually normally just explain like a software engineer job because otherwise it gets too hard. I think like, so to like a 5-year-old, I just say like, I make things, I make software, like I make games, I make apps,
Games,
like
yeah,
that sort of thing. Like actually like phone games are like the most real thing
yeah,
to a young kid. So I just
yeah,
tell them I do that for simplicity. To someone that's, I think a little bit older or in this space a little bit, I think my job is kind of half software development, half marketing is probably the best way of putting it, because I have to keep my like development chops up. I have to keep exploring things to talk authentically to developers and to write in a way that developers can understand. But I'm also not maintaining production apps. I don't have a Jira board with little issues that come in, which is kind of both a good and a bad thing. But it's more like there's some things that are liberating about a developer advocate role, just being able to explore things and try new technologies that just at a rank and file sort of dev job you wouldn't get the ability to do. But you do miss out on some of the like there's some bit of software development I miss of like having something that you ship and you put out there that's doing things as well. So it's a bit of a mix.
yeah, yeah. I hear you, and I mean I've known you for years and years now. You're awesome at what you do, but how did you even start? Like, did you always want to do this growing up?
No, it's funny. So back in the day when I started off working at an insurance company here in Lansing. That's how I specifically ended up at Lansing. It's just first job out of college doing that. And I liked the place, but it was also not super challenging. It was just Java apps with really simple front end, and that's all there was. And so at the time I was younger and I was just super interested in web stuff. So I started experimenting and writing about it. And eventually someone suggested like, hey, this is interesting. You give it as a conference talk. And so I did that sort of as well. And then one thing led to another. Actually, Burke saw one of my conference talks online and reached out to me. And that's sort of how I ended up here. It was never necessarily my goal to be a developer advocate, but I don't know. I think it's funny. I One thing I tell people a lot is I think what ended up getting me finding a niche for me is that I did spend a lot of time like in school and such back in the day in terms of just like working on my writing and speaking and such. And it's one thing that I just didn't necessarily see that being something that would be a differentiator for me later on. But like, I don't think I'm the world's most talented software developer. In fact, I know I'm not. I'm not even like top tier. I'm decent at it, but the thing is, there's lots of people that are really good, and there's lots of competition for that sort of thing. There's lots of people that have tons of time to throw at that, and I think being able to write and speak is a way of me standing out from the crowd, because a lot of developers have no interest in doing that. They're just happy to code on their apps, get on their way, and don't feel the need to write that up. So I think for those people that sort of thing is sort of interesting or unique to them, it's a good way to stand out from the crowd. And it definitely has worked for me over the years.
Yeah, well said. And by Burke, TJ meant Burke Holland, who used to work with us. I mean, folks on the chat room, you can look him up. He's awesome. Also a strong developer with a lot of JavaScript background. Yeah, looks like, let's see. Gabriel Hicks Dev. Yeah, that is awesome. It is a unique kind of niche thing that we do, and it's not for everyone, and probably isn't something everyone wants to do, like you said. It is a mix of a lot of writing, a lot of speaking, but also developing a lot as well. So yeah, it's unique. So speaking of like what you do right now, like I have actually seen you go through a whole gamut of technologies, because again, we are getting old. We can see technologies come and fail. So I mean, did you write a book on jQuery back in the days?
I do. Yeah, I have it over here somewhere. jQuery UI in action. And actually,
Nice.
I just got the email. Actually, it sold like 5 copies in the last quarter of last year. So I have like a $40 check coming in the mail. So
Nice.
some people are still picking up the book somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's back when I was younger, like right before I had kids and I had a little bit more time, and I was just super passionate about jQuery. So I got involved. I was on the jQuery UI team for a few years. I wrote a book about jQuery UI.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
the book did okay. It was a lot of work, but
Hmm.
it's fun to have out there, and it's fun to occasionally go out to Amazon and look and have a book out there. It's just kind
Right.
of the
Yeah.
unique thing.
It's a good feeling. But I mean, like they say, like you made that mistake once,
Yeah.
and you realize how much work that is. And I mean, I had done a book on like Windows 8, and like it's still selling. Like it's like trickle one or two people, and I want to reach out and like, don't buy it anymore.
Yeah, I'm really wondering who these people are that
Yeah.
I mean, you could maybe make the case that like somebody's got some legacy thing and like their apps are really coupled to it and they need to use it. But I am very curious, who are these people that are.
You will be surprised, and like we talk about this often. Like jQuery is never going to be dead for whatever flack that it gets. Like think about how much it's used in production everywhere. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think
mean,
what you have is
jQuery
wonderful.
UI still very much works. I mean, it's if you need to toss in a couple of quick UI widgets. I mean, I would argue that at this point there are probably better choices out there, because those have aged more than a little bit at this point, but they still work. And I think we sometimes are quick to criticize people using
Mhm.
older tech stacks, but I mean, if it works and you're getting the job done,
Exactly.
more power to you.
Yeah. So like I have seen you go from like vanilla JavaScript and jQuery, and then different Spa frameworks. You did NativeScript for quite some time. You are now into React. So kind of walking through all of these years, like what's the most exciting part of what you do, and what's the most challenging thing?
I think what's exciting is, I don't know, to me, there's the JavaScript world is sort of, there's the whole saying JavaScript fatigue and JavaScript is crazy. And you have all the jokes about how there's a new JavaScript, you blink and there's two new JavaScript frameworks out there. And I think there's two different ways that's almost like simultaneously the most exciting and the most depressing part of it, because it's exciting in that, like, I think you want to be involved in an industry where there is a lot of change, and it
Right.
keeps you engaged, it keeps you interested. There's constantly new things to explore, but you have to strike a balance between that and also just getting overwhelmed, because I think especially to a lot of people that are new in the industry, it's easy to think like, oh, if I don't know this framework that came out a couple weeks ago, I'm so far behind. And you have to, especially as an advocate and someone that, like, I'm supposed to be speaking from almost like an authoritative point of view, or I'm supposed to be someone that's giving advice and knowledge out to people. It can be hard to get people to strike that balance. But I am of the opinion that JavaScript, this is a good thing for JavaScript, that you want this sort of churn and craziness, because inevitably the better solutions are the things that are genuinely helping people will rise to the top and will get more popular. So for the people that are just more casual developers, or people that are just don't have the time to explore all of these things, there's no reason you have to. You can just sort of wait around and see what things sort of logically go get big, and then check them out when you have the problem that these things solve.
Yeah, and your fundamentals, I mean, those don't need to change. Like your programming fundamentals, like languages will come and go, but if you know what you're doing, it's easy to kind of maybe get up to speed and start learning something.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I've run the gambit from jQuery, Backbone, Angular, done some Vue, React, a little bit of
Right.
everything. And none of them are like, first of all, the JavaScript language stays the same between all of them. But then even like I always make this comparison with iOS and Android. Like I feel like back in the day, there used to be strong reasons to pick iOS or Android, but nowadays they just steal all the good ideas from each other. So
Pretty
it's
much.
like um, there's less of a difference between the two, and it's more, I guess, for like phones, it would be more based off hardware than the software nowadays. And I think the same is kind of true with the JavaScript frameworks as well. Like if these are all like open source, free, liberally licensed things, so guess what? If the React team has a good idea, then Vue and Angular are going to try to steal it or apply that idea if they can. And so there's tons of examples of this sort of thing. Like TypeScript was a good idea, and so a lot of people are building up with that. React came up with hooks, and Vue kind of implemented something similar. So you don't have to feel, I don't worry as much about feeling locked into a specific technology because so much of it is similar and transferable.
Yeah. And to your point, like even though you have a lot of like JavaScript stuff to build with, but I mean the core of the bigger ones, I mean they are kind of steady in terms of enterprise apps, right? The Angular and the React, I mean they are here. So you might have like smaller frameworks here and there or things you plug in, but again, the core of it is there for you now.
Yeah, it's actually kind of crazy how much the bigger players haven't changed all that much in the last probably I'd say like 4 or 5 years. Like we've sort of established Angular, React, and Vue are the heavy hitters. They have their niche. I would say niche, but they're all kind of big players. They're and I don't think between the big ones you can necessarily make a wrong choice. There's perhaps better choices depending on what your team is, what you're building, sort of thing. But I mean, pretty much you could pick any of them and be successful, and you don't have to worry too much.
Exactly. No, well said. All right. So speaking of tech, looking back maybe in the last few months, like what's maybe a coolest piece of tech that you have seen, like a feature or something about some technology stack that you really like?
So I really like in the React world, there's this framework called Next.js, which, so another like trend I'm sort of fascinated with is we as developers seem obsessed between like moving certain things from the client to the server back to the client sort of thing. So back in the day, everything used to be the server, right? We'd use like PHP or like it was ASP. I can't remember the exact term to like render out. Or like in Java world, we were using JSPs to render things. Then at some point we decided that was bad. So we went to like a single page app framework. So the way Angular and React and Vue work today, very much the front end's totally in control of rendering sort of everything. So the latest trend is now like we're realizing there's actually some value in having the server render chunks of this, because if you have JavaScript do everything, the client has to download all the JavaScript and then render things, and that's slower. And so you have these like these frameworks like Gatsby and it's like 11D, these Jekyll sites that render static sites. So that was sort of the wave moving things back a little bit towards the server. And now to bring this sort of full circle and get back to answering your question, you have these frameworks that are starting to experiment with what if we do like some mix of both? So React is doing this thing called server components, where basically you can write components and name them .server.js, and they're designed to be rendered on the server. And the cool thing about that is, so let's say you're writing a component that does some date processing, right? Like you just need to display some dates. So you bring in a JavaScript library that helps you manipulate dates, because if you don't use a library, it's kind of a mess to do that sort of thing. So with React server components, what you can do is you can design it so that the client never needs to download that date library. So date libraries can also be quite big, because if you're, especially if you're dealing with global dates, like you might need to handle all sorts of different locales. So what if the server component was hosted on the server and your date library, the dependency, never left the server either? So what you're downloading from the server, instead of being like just a React component, it's basically done a bunch of the pre-rendering on the server that you downloaded. And I mentioned Next. Next is also a framework that's also just makes server-side rendering within an app a little bit easier. So I'd say just collectively, the coolest thing or the coolest trend I'm watching is just these things that let you kind of use frameworks like React or things that are traditionally just complete like single page app frameworks, but bringing in some of the server into the equation. I think that's kind of cool. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that, just because there's a ton of performance potential benefits to be gained by doing that.
Yeah. And, again, I mean, this kind of comes down to like how much time you spend in the industry doing the things. You start seeing those pendulum things, and you probably go too far one way, and then you realize there were some benefits to the other way. So, and you're absolutely right. There are big benefits of doing some things server side, because especially when you talk about like thinner clients, mobile devices, like you want some of that HTML just shipped and ready, and not doing all the hard work on the client side. Yeah. And the other thing that I also find interesting is like you and me come from completely different backgrounds, right? I'm heavy .NET. I'm old. I've done a lot of XAML, and the problems that we solve between like web and other stacks are actually very similar. Like you have data binding, you have routing. It's the same problems, just in different kind of manifestations.
Yeah. Yeah. And I come from, I mean, I did Java. So back mentioned, I worked for an insurance company that was a big Java shop. And even though it's different, like I always think of Java stacks as similar to .NET stacks, but like completely different technology chain. But like to your point, you're solving the same problems. It's at the end of the day, you're probably rendering to the web. Maybe you're rendering a desktop app, but you have some way you have to store your data somehow, and you have to spit out views with that data somehow. So inevitably, it's the same concept, but just a different way of accomplishing it.
Yeah. And I also like how like some of the modern technology stacks like give us the benefit of kind of crossing the boundaries of where things run. And maybe some of it is not fitting for every need. But I mean, web apps are more than welcome now on mobile devices. Like you have PWAs, you can have JavaScript native apps. Like if you talk about technologies, like web can power stuff on the desktop as well. So I think that's interesting that we, as developers, like we have that kind of choice.
Yeah, and it's also just the desktop world, like how many apps nowadays are built with web tech. Like VS
Yeah,
Code is
everything.
like just shocks me that some of these things are built with web tech, Slack,
Yeah, yeah.
Spotify,
A
all
lot
those
of
sorts of
it.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What it comes down to is like how careful are you with like resource management? Because again, if you're putting things again, I mean, I'm not putting a shade on like things like Electron, which are very good, but like how much of the stuff are you shipping? Like, are you shipping Chromium? Are you shipping Node, or could you do without it? And then kind of go a little more lightweight. So it's a balancing act, but yeah, it's remarkable that all of these are just straight up web apps that run perfectly fine on desktop.
Yeah, because I'm still of the obviously if you can build truly native to whatever it is you're doing, and you have the team that can do it and the time and the capability, then yeah, you're going to put out a better product. But the line between that and good enough is continuing to shrink.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
you can, I mean, the fact that some of these bigger apps are doing it is still kind of crazy to me. So
Yeah.
I mean, would VS Code be better if it was written completely natively for each platform? I mean, sure, but then those teams would get caught up on the intricacies of those platforms, and their efforts would be split. And
Yeah, native is expensive. It's hard. And again, I mean, if you have, like you said, like if you have the time and the folks to do it, by all means, go do it. But it's a fine line, like you said. It's good enough. Yeah.
yeah, you have like Xcode. Xcode is absolutely fantastic, but Apple pays thousands of people billions of dollars to make that,
Mm-hmm.
and almost nobody outside of that scale can afford to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we live in an ever changing technology world, for better or worse, and I think you and me both love all the change. But hey, take it slow if that's what it means for you to be delivering apps for your business, for your workflows. Let's talk about something else here. You and me are kind of both techies, but looking at what's around you, like what's your favorite like gadget that you swear by?
Oh man, gadget. So I do love my Nintendo Switch, which is I don't think it's not an
Yeah, it
uncommon
counts.
pick.
Yeah.
I think it still counts, but I still think the novelty of just being able to plug it into a big TV and take it out is huge. And we ended up splurging and getting some for my kids, which I was hesitant for, but they love it too. So they kept stealing mine. So eventually we decided to bite the bullet and get like a family suite of Switches, which ended up being the right decision because now we can take games on the go and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And how old are your kids?
They are now 10 and
10. And they're
twins.
twins, right? Yeah,
Yep.
nice.
Twin
So they
boy.
keep each other busy, and I'm sure you folks busy as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I have any more like interesting or niche tech picks, because I probably do. I've been trying to use my Kindle a little bit more. I still like those. I've been trying to get off of for a while I was using just the Kindle app on my phone, but I keep getting distracted when I do
There's so
that.
much else on it.
And it takes me out of the moment. And the Kindle tech has come a long ways. Like I swear it's powered by magic because the battery lasts an
Lasts
absolute
forever.
it lasts forever. And I don't know how that's even possible, but
Yeah, there is some nicety to batteries lasting that long, especially on we're just reading books. Yeah, I mean it should. I have been on like the Apple Watch bandwagon for quite some time, but before I did, I had a Fitbit, and I had like a couple of Fitbits, and it's wonderful when your battery lasts like 4 or 5 days easily, and it's tracking your sleep and all that stuff. So, I mean, do you sign up for charging your devices every night, or would you prefer them?
I'm definitely a charge at night person.
Yeah,
So
I am too now.
I've got the watch too, and the battery life's never really bothered me on this because I don't like wearing it to sleep. So as long as it makes it through a day, that's sufficient enough for me.
Yeah, me too. I actually charge it kind of before it, like before I go to bed, so it's like kind of ready for me. Even though it doesn't do as good of a job with sleep tracking, at least it's something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with our kid, ours is 5. He's actually just turning 5 this year. I'm on the Xbox bandwagon. I still maintain one that is mine. I don't know how long that's gonna last. I mean, I got my games, and he's got his little things that he plays. Eventually, he's gonna want to come and play my stuff. So we'll see how we handle that.
Yeah, my kids, we ended up getting them, so they're home for school for just pandemic reasons, and we ended up getting them just PCs, and because they wanted to play the PC Minecraft version, like with their friends. Apparently, like it's one of those moments where I feel old that I don't totally understand it, and my kids are like explaining to me why they need this version of it. And like I never thought this would happen to me, but to the point where like I don't understand, but let's just go and get you some like low end gaming PCs that you can use also for school related things. But I'm now that person that like doesn't understand the games and the things that my kids are doing.
Yeah, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. It's not going to stop. They're going to keep on going with their friends, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. You talked quite a bit about work and web frameworks. What about your life, like outside of work? What's your work and social life balance? What do you do outside of work?
Oh man, not as much as I'd like to anymore. I mean, we were talking about like DevRel and like why you do DevRel, and one of the appeals to me always was there's some travel involved because travel was always a big part of my life. It's kind of one of my biggest hobbies. It's kind of met my wife. Like we're both big. We like just going places, just checking out new cities, and obviously that's kind of come to a pause recently, which has been kind of rough, honestly. Yeah. Like I never realized how much I missed even honestly, even the mundane things. Like there's obviously certain trips that I enjoy more than others. And I'm sure you can relate to this as well. Like you get sick of going to certain places repetitively, sort of thing over and over again. But now I find that I even miss like that bit of human contact because I didn't realize how much I sort of depended on that and kind of enjoyed getting out and doing things all the time. But we have done some things. So I don't know if my camera can quite see it, but I store my bike here in the office, which my wife absolutely loves that location. But I like my bike. I'll even ride it in the winter. Although we were talking earlier on, the snow will stop me. So I'm sort of monitoring. We have some snow right now. Have you ever seen the bikes with the giant tires that go through the snow?
Like really thick ones? Yeah.
Like ridiculously, like almost like monster wheels for bikes.
Yeah.
I'm to the point of like I'm considering getting one of those just so that I can keep riding throughout the winter. And not that I go crazy, right? I'm too old. I don't go very far. I just go a couple miles, but I just like going outside and doing something, going somewhere. In terms of other hobbies, we've gotten into a little bit more winter sports type stuff. So we went skiing first time in my life I went skiing was last year, and I was pretty awful at it, but I've now went a couple times. We're going again later this year, and it's pretty fun. I'm still awful, but I'm a little less awful. But
Right.
it's funny too, because it's another one of those moments where my kids picked it up like 10 times faster than I did. So it gets depressing to be like, I'm like really trying and trying hard, and then like my kids are just like sliding up and like almost quite literally circling me, because
Oh, boy.
they can keep going for longer than I can. So I can practice a little bit when we go out, but they seem to have no end to their energy, so they can keep at it and keep getting better.
Yeah. And yeah, tell me about yeah, pandemic and a big part of kind of what kind of gets us going is yeah, travel is fun maybe until it's not, when you're maybe doing too much, and you always like miss parts of what your kids are up to, but it's just like hanging out with like-minded people and chatting and learning and all of that in-person things which we cannot do since like last May. Hey, so yeah, it's difficult for everybody, but what can you do? At least, I mean, this is the kind of the whole reason why we have a chat show, so we kind of can have a conversation and just explicitly take time off to kind of chat. Because like when we are at a conference or any other like developer type things, like we often the most value is in those like hallway things. You sit down and you have a chat with somebody, you learn something new, and you just like make a friend or something. So yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, I mean, I love my family, but it is really rough being in a house with the same people for basically a year at this point, or at least we're
Mm-hmm.
coming up to it, because it gets rough, and it's been hard on the kids too, because at least
Oh,
I
yeah.
can go out somewhat, but they really have nowhere
Yeah.
to go, or they see their
Yeah,
friends
it's hard.
occasionally. But I don't know, we've been
Yeah.
trying to get out, do some things. As I said, skiing, sledding, biking, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, what can we do? I mean, just powering through, and all signs point towards things getting better by sometime this year. So fingers
Yep.
crossed. What about food? Are you a foodie? Do you cook?
I like food. I do like to cook. I'm not that great at it. So we do. Are you familiar with HelloFresh?
Hmm?
And
Yeah.
there's other services like it that are
Yeah.
basically the same thing. But we do that because I like to cook, but I don't like to shop. At least for like recipes, usually are the
It's already.
worst. So I like getting the like pre-portioned things and just being able to cook it. So we do that, and we're actually pretty big fans of it.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
we've been doing that for a couple years now, because I don't know, I cooking is one of those things that it's my time that like puts my mind at ease. It's just an activity where you can get sucked into it. It's
Right.
kind of relaxing, but I still like the structure of they give me the things and they give me instructions, so I can just sort of focus on that. I can have, I don't know, podcast in the background,
Right. Right.
sports in the background, something.
Yeah, I know a lot of folks like that stuff, and to your point, like we've been in this mode of doing like a weekly grocery run, and it's kind of like what's the movie, The Survival of the Fittest,
Oh yeah,
the Mockingbird thing. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
yeah.
It's hard. Like you're going out and you're trying to plan every meal for the week, and it just takes forever. So yeah, I see that. How does that work out, like in terms of like eco-friendliness? Like you folks are like recycling things, or do they ship in kind of recycling containers?
They're pretty good about it, because I think they realize that's a common complaint. So I mean, they really want you to think they're eco-friendly, because they like
Mm,
splatter it all over the box. They put like, they'll send packaging that says like, "Hey, I'm recyclable" on it. So they kind of have some fun with it. It's not like, in my opinion, it's not as good as if you were going to the grocery store and picking things up, but
yeah,
they've done a pretty good job of making it not that bad, because they mostly ship cardboard. They ship a few like ice packets, because they have to be able to keep
right.
the food cold. But the packets, like they have some stuff that you can just dump in the trash, and then the actual packaging is recyclable. There's a bit more plastic waste, because they have to individually wrap certain things. So it's not perfect, but it's
Yeah,
also, even if you go to the grocery store, I mean, there's a certain amount of waste
sure. Yeah,
associated with doing that as well. So it's not that bad, and you can tell that they're trying too, which is
and
kind of nice.
that consciousness is all that matters. Just you're trying. Yeah, nothing is going to be perfect, but at least we can all try. Yeah. All right, this may be a trick question. If you had $1 million right now, what would you do?
Oh man, so this is tough because historically this would have been an easy answer because like traveling is my thing, and traveling is the one thing like I'm usually a relatively frugal person. Like I don't. There's certain traditional things that you'd spend a ton of money on just don't appeal to me. I'm not a car person. I'm sorry, so I wouldn't go out and buy a car. I don't really care too much about our house, although we have been doing some things since we've been at home because there's not much else to do. So we have been putting some very non-exciting things into the house. But travel is one thing where like I will splurge like 100%, and to me it's worth it. So I would 100% buy like a fancy plane ticket and then book a fancy hotel, go someplace really fun. I like Europe a lot. Probably would pick that. But I'm not booking that flight today. And I'm probably not booking it. Maybe if like for later in the year, put like a down payment down or something. It's funny too. My wife's a big cruise person. She really likes them. I'm sort of okay with them. But it's been funny watching their advertisements they've been sending out, getting like more and more desperate over the last few months. And I laugh, but I do feel
it's
kind
hard.
of I feel kind of bad for them. So
yeah.
So I struggle laughing, but what I do find amusing is they used to be absolutely awful about letting you like reschedule or cancel or move things. Basically, like you had to have like at least two of your children had to be kidnapped if you wanted to change the day of a cruise previously. And now they send out these flyers that are like book anytime, like switch, great, like switch your dates at any time. They like all of a sudden they found all these amazing flexibility options, which I just kind of find amusing.
Yeah, and I mean it's sad because like we are in an industry that is very open to keeping businesses kind of going as usual, but like think about like travel or the food or any other industry. It's hard for so many people. So it's yeah. What can you say? And go on.
I don't have a good answer for you. I wish I had something fancy, but like I wouldn't, even if I could, I don't think I'd buy. I have no interest in like a fancy car, sports car. I wouldn't even know what to do with it. I'd be afraid to drive it. I'd probably just do some mundane things like sort of around the house. We're doing some things with our kitchen. I don't know. I'm not spending $1 million in the kitchen, but having it would help pay for it for sure.
I bet. Yeah, and you're right. And my wife and I are also in the same boat. Like travel is something. I mean, you might think like you're wasting money, but that's just never the thing because you open your mind. You go places, you see different cultures, you see different things. It's just never something you should not think about travel as like wasting money. It's kind of putting in an investment.
And like it's funny too, like growing up, we were always so like we didn't go, we barely traveled at all. And when we did, it was always like stay at like the cheapest hotel and like try to find ways of saving money here and there. And now that I'm not rich by any means, but I can afford some things. Like I think like I just get some satisfaction out of like I never thought I'd be the person who would go and pick out like a nice hotel. Like I thought I grew up with the notion like my parents beat into me that like, oh, that's a waste of money. Why would anybody do that? This Motel 6 is fine. All we just need is a bed to sleep on, sort of thing. So like part of me is like I have to fight against that notion because that was instilled into my brain from a very young age. But now I'm totally the person that like I will spend a few $100s on a hotel per night that's a fancier hotel, and I don't feel much guilt about it, and I genuinely enjoy it. So
I mean, it's a treat for your family, and you're all having a good time and making memories. So yeah, and like you and me have kind of both grown up from like the early stages of our career where we used to just kind of speak a lot and go places, and we have like I like saying like we have done our share of like Motel 6s and sharing rooms and all that. We have maybe earned a little bit of a hotel room for ourselves.
Yeah. We'll see. And this is for personal travel too. When I travel on Progress's dime, I don't fling money around quite so much. At least I try not to.
We're a public company. Yeah.
Well, at least I don't publicly, right? This is being recorded, so I'm very frugal on progress this time, for sure.
That's what TJ said on the internet.
Yes, just want the record to reflect that.
All right, TJ, thank you for taking the time out. I know you're super busy to just come and hang out and chat. Looking maybe at the past or looking ahead in the next few months or a few years, like what are some things you are excited about that you're looking forward to?
I don't know, like obviously a vaccine distribution would be one thing to be excited about. I'm definitely excited to be getting involved more with travel. I am sort of, in a serious notion, I am sort of fascinated by the whole logistics of the vaccine distribution and how that's getting out there. And I'm sort of really interested in how we're going to choose to open things up. And like, there's a tech component and a non-tech component, because obviously I'm curious, like when I'm going to be able to eat at a restaurant again, sort of thing. But I'm also interested, like with the tech events, how many, like in the summer, are some tech events actually going to happen in person? Are we going to do some sort of hybrid model where like some people are in person and some people that are going to stream it? Because I think one thing I've sort of been intrigued by is during the pandemic, just things like we're doing here, like on Twitch, and so many of these events have pivoted to some sort of remote model, some sort of, I don't know, we've seen all mix of things. And to me, most
different things.
Yeah. And to me, honestly, most of the remote events that I've went to have kind of sucked and I don't put the blame for that on sort of the event organizers, because I actually feel some sympathy for them, because they were just told very suddenly, hey, this important money making or community venture that you do is suddenly radically shifting. Good luck, try to survive. So I feel some sympathy for them, but I'm hoping that we get some sort of new some innovation out of all of this towards a better way of doing remote events. And so far, I haven't seen anything that works. I mean, we tried with DevReach. I enjoyed DevReach. That's an event we do here at Progress. So we normally hold that in Bulgaria in person totally. And we did it entirely on Twitch this year with totally just a completely new format. And I don't think it was like revolutionary, groundbreaking. I don't think we fundamentally changed the industry, but I am happy that we're experimenting. And I enjoy doing that more than I did just showing up to hear like a bunch of Zoom calls with people. So
yeah,
I don't know.
It is hard. Let's take a quick pause here. Imran Ocean, smallest republic. Hello. Ingushetia, where is that? We are speaking of travel. Maybe we can visit. Where is that, Imran? Because I have no idea unless I do a search.
Which I'm totally doing right now.
and you're right. Like, I mean, we have seen like a whole gamut of different types of platforms for conferences, and it's hard to kind of suddenly stop doing what you're doing, right? I mean, if you are if you're using that as an income source, that's rough. And if you're doing it just for the community, like that's your brand building, that's rough. So I mean, people have pivoted, and I mean, we're doing a lot of conferences that are kind of in that hybrid mode now. Like Europe is faring a little better on some aspects than we are. So we shall see. All signs, again, fingers crossed, point towards like late summer and fall, slowly starting getting back to some form of normalcy. So we shall see.
Yeah, and I think like, at least in my head, the biggest players are probably going to be the ones that are most hesitant because of liability and such. So I have a feeling like official Microsoft and Google events probably are going to be a while, but I don't know. Like I'm sort of with you that like some of these community events, I'm hoping like summer and fall are going to start to happen. But just to get back to just answering your question, just sort of how that's going to play out is kind of fascinating to me. So I'm kind of going to be watching when these things come back, just both because I'm personally interested, and also, I mean, it affects our job quite directly in terms of when we're going to get out there, when people are going to feel safe, how the logistics around that are going to work, and all that is, I don't know, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. It'll be the story of the year for sure. For sure. Okay. Yeah, so we got plenty to look forward to. Hopefully, some things happen like in person. Like, and to your point, like we host a big conference called DevReach, which is actually a premier conference in Central
and Eastern Europe. We do it at our engineering headquarters in Sofia, Bulgaria, and we get like 1,500 people to show up, which we could not obviously do in 2020. In 2021, fingers crossed, it's our hope that we'll at least be able to do a hybrid. So do some in-person things, and we'll obviously not let go of Twitch. Because again, maybe a part of this is like we have all learned how to pivot and do things more virtually than we normally would. So there is an aspect of this that we don't also want to let go.
Yep. So Sam, you're setting if you're setting the Vegas odds here, what are the odds? Like DevReach is in the fall, right? What are the odds that we make that trip physically, do you say, if you're setting the odds for this?
I think it's fairly an optimistic goal to set because I think like if we can speed up, and there's a lot of factors in it, like you said, like it's just about the vaccine production, the shipping, and like at what point do you get to a point where maybe like 50 to 60% of the population is good to go? So maybe you don't have like the herd immunity thing that people talk about, but at least you're good enough and you feel like you're not kind of risking your own health or the health of your family if you take a trip out. So I think like fall is looking good. It's looking optimistic for now.
Yeah, I've got it. Like it'll be interesting because you would hope that, and you would also hope that like the people that would have the most to worry would also be the ones that would be vaccinated by that point. Yeah. But I'm going to put it at a 50-50, at least in my head.
Pretty much. Yeah, 50-50.
Because I could see it going kind of either way.
Yeah. All right, well, fingers crossed. We'll see what happens. So folks in the chat room, normally this Friday show, we kind of hang around, we chat, which I'm actually glad that we get to chat because otherwise we're just all about work. Normally this is the last show for Code It Live for the week, but actually today, in just about actually 10 minutes, we're going to have another show coming up. And let's see. We read S5. Hello. You're catching us at the trail end. But stick around because I think our good friend Ed Charbonneau is grabbing one other good friend of ours, David Pine from Microsoft. They did a whole stream on Siglanar, which is real-time communication. It's fascinating stuff for web and mobile and desktop. And I think they're not quite done with what they were building last week. So they're going to be back on and building more stuff starting at 11 Eastern time. So in about 10 minutes from here. So yeah, stick around with us. And TJ, thank you so much. You are awesome for what you do. I've known you for years and years. You're amazing at tech, obviously, but you're also great with people. And that's what makes you a great developer advocate.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'll have to stick around for the stream too. They were building a card game, right? I saw some of it. It's kind of cool stuff. So
yeah,
we'll check that out too.
All right, folks in the chat room, thank you so much for hanging out with us. We appreciate it, and we'll see you on the next stream.
Okay. Sounds good. See you, everybody.
Bye for now.